Today is a brief talk about my favorite top 5 solo piano albums of all time. Get your thinking caps on because I want to find out what yours are. Stick around. Hi, this is Ted Varsley with Alamo Piano Galleries. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And if you get a chance, take a look at alamopianogalleries.com and you can shop our website there and you'll find a lot of the instruments that are portrayed on this channel. They're available for sale with a lot of details in it. And as I mentioned, today is a top 5 album presentation. And as I was thinking about this, I thought, you know what, I have most of these on CD. However, I owned them on vinyl, and originally I did. And so coming up with the list is pretty easy for me because I look at solo piano albums as what was really influential to me, what made me want to practice more, to become a better pianist, and to want to be a more in-depth or involved composer. And with that, I realized I had to cut out favorite piano albums that weren't solo. I had to cut out anything that used electronic or digital instruments, even though I wanted to put Wendy Carlo's Switched on Bach on here because that's a great musical album, but not solo piano. The song selection on that album on solo piano would be gorgeous anyway. And that brings me to my first one on the list, number 5. Number 5 is Glenn Gould's Goldberg Variations, which really fired me up. And I think that's inspired a lot of classical pianists, mostly because it's the one that lays down kind of like the schematic and the scaffolding and the diction for how music is interpreted on an instrument. What's really funny is that it's a piano recording, and not any of these songs were ever really composed on a piano. And I don't know that if Bach ever played them on a piano. But that's beside the point. The other thing I wanted to talk about this Goldberg variation is Glenn Gould has 2 recordings of the Goldberg variations, and there's another one in the middle. Early on in his career, that's what made his career, was his debut album, the Goldberg variations. And then toward the end of his career, he did a re-recording of the Goldberg variations where the tempos were different and the presentations are a little bit different. And I enjoy both of those. It's really inspiring to see how much you can bend and warp and change the presentation of someone's composition just by how it's presented and how it's played. That album, I think the initial one is probably one of the most flawless recordings ever made. There's been great recordings with none of the noise and the sound and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't destined for vinyl from the first place. There's been some CD recordings that are just really phenomenal. That's my number 5. My number 4 is kind of along the line of pianist composer, and it is a compilation album by this artist called David Lanz. And the album that I really fell in love with is called Return to the Heart. And on this album, he plays a lot of his better known and more popular pieces from his concerts and touring. And he was touring Europe when he recorded this album. And to me, this is the pinnacle point of being a pianist composer. He recorded this album in Europe in these great halls using their phenomenal instruments. So every song, or usually for the most part, almost every song is recorded in a different hall on a different, really great, phenomenal piano. And some of them are really well-known historical piano. So it's just a fabulous concept. It's something that I dreamed of. I thought that would be the way to travel the world as a pianist composer. And you play in these wonderful halls and you can record and release an album from that. And to me, I think anyone that ever aspired to be a composer or a pianist or ever sell a ticket or record an album and dream of a life, that to me is the one. Return to the Heart by David Lanz is a great album, and you can tell in his playing. The guy is extreme. I mean, I don't have anything against his other recordings, but on that album there, I think he realized he was living a dream. At least in my mind, he was. My number 3 album is also another very influential album, and I think this album probably sets precedent for changing, or at least altering or adding a very new, at the time, genre to the music field, and that is George Winston's December album. It pretty much is the album that is credited with inventing the New Age music. How that phrase New Age, which is kind of like a spiritual religious movement kind of thing as well, got applied toward music, I don't know. I think what they mean by that New Age meaning is they're taking the old stuff, which is a solo instrument, and putting it in front of your face again and call it, hey, this is the New Age. It's not all classical music and stuff that makes you angry. It's melodic stuff played on a piano or on a guitar. New Age music was really big in the late 70s and all through the 80s, and it continued to grow and prosper even through the 90s, and it still does to now. George Winston's December was a major influential album for me because it made me want to practice more, invent better songs, create more melodic stuff, and really, really focus on tempos and precision. That's just my own personal take. And in terms of tempo and precision and coming up with a great recording of pieces, then my number 2 solo piano album of all time is Vladimir Horowitz, my favorite, or it's just favorite Beethoven sonatas. And this includes the Passionata, the Moonlight, and the Pathétique. And these are probably the go-to listen to recordings with headphones and the music on your lap. Do that 10 or 15 times and you have a really, really good concept for how to play the piano. I'm assuming you know how to play and read, but that's a great learning instruction. As any of these albums with the headphones on and the music on your lap is just a great, great learning process. It's a great way to appreciate the material and also not just the artistic talent, but the composer's talent. And finally, when I had decided as a teenager that I was going to pursue piano, the one album that pushed me over the edge and made sure that I never stopped practicing was Keith Jarrett's Koln Concert. And it's kind of funny that I mentioned that because I know he's probably cringing right now. And I know that Keith Jarrett personally wants to collect every copy of this album in the world and get it into a dump site or have a massive burning. And that's because for him, it wasn't a pleasant experience. The fact that it was recorded and became one of his most successful album. I think that's his toppermost selling album of all time, the Koln Concert. And that concert started off with him having a discussion with the promoter in front of a Steinway D, and he said, no, the concert's going to be canceled. It's not happening. That's how that concert started. And it's such a fascinating story because the piano, I thought sounded great, but apparently in person it didn't sound great. They did some things in the recording to make up for it. But apparently there was a lot of playing problems. The pedals didn't work. He had to notate some of the keys. I think he had a few of them taped down or marked so he couldn't play them. And it was a 100% improvisational concert, which is why I bought the album in the first place. I was 14 years old and I thought, hey man, this guy walked out there and made all this stuff up. And then someone told me, yeah, and apparently it wasn't that good of a piano either. So with that, I bought the album, went home and tore it up and couldn't believe that one, it was not that good of a piano, and two, that he made it all up. But it is absolutely true. So true that there is a independent, I think, short film coming out about the woman who produced and promoted that concert. She was 19 or 20 years old at the time, and she had a number of very successful concerts along the lines of Keith Jarrett type artists all over the Europe market. And apparently that was one of her near heart attack experiences when she was 19 or 20, is Keith Jarrett, the artist, saying this concert's not going to happen. And then it ends up being his top selling album. That was truly inspiring for me as a teenager. It still is to a lot of people to this day, because that movie is yet to, I think it's just about now being released. There's a lot of promos, and I did read an interview with Keith Jarrett about that concert and about the film about that concert, and that piano is featured in there, but it's not the main thrust of the story. The main thrust of the story is about the extremely young promoter that pulled off some very successful career as promoting some artists that otherwise probably wouldn't have venues available to them. So those are my top 5 solo piano recordings of all times that I like. And granted, everyone should have a different list. There's no agreement as to what makes the perfect list, but what I'm interested in is which top 5 albums of yours are your pick that made you want to stick with the piano, practice more, write better, compose better, do more shows, raise your ticket prices, whatever it is. Everyone has their own personal favorites. I just listed 5 of mine. And I think at one time in the past, Patrick and I did a visit on either favorite keyboard or piano albums or solo albums. And it really is, at first you think you have all these great ideas, and then you realize solo piano recorded albums. It's like, wow, there's a lot of them out there. And if you're a pianist, it's hard to decide. If you're a composer, well, then you have to have a favorite composer, and then you have to hope that your favorite composer has done a solo album. And there's a lot of my favorite composers that haven't done solo albums. Yeah, they have albums out, but not just them at a piano or on a guitar for like the entire time. That is what I call a solo album. So I'm looking forward with this interaction we have here with the listeners. I want to know what your top 5 solo piano recorded albums are of all time and why each one was important to you. And until then, I'll be waiting to hear those responses. I'll be Ted Barsalou here at Alamo Piano Galleries waiting to hear from you. Thank you so much.